this big piece is just hundreds of years of systemic oppression. We're pushing back and working on healing from policies that were meant to eradicate our communities.
Which leads me actually to, I think, an important question. And that is, especially if, say, the Native woman's perpetrator is her husband or boyfriend who happens to be a Native man. Can you expand on the idea of linking the fact that obviously his perpetration is not condoned, but at the same time, his own shame comes from hundreds of years of imperialistic torture and colonization and perpetration against him? Can you kind of expand on the link? Again, it doesn't mean that what he does for Native women is okay, but to kind of look at some of the roots of that perpetration, looking at the roots of that shame that most perpetrators experience in their expression of their violence. Can you kind of help discuss that link? Because I feel like this is really an important aspect when that's on top of the localized domestic violence. There's a wider conversation.
Sure, and I think we really saw this during COVID. We saw an increase in domestic violence kind of across the board. We knew that folks were calling more often and trying to get services and resources. But we also saw what the families were really struggling with during that time, which was access to healthcare. So we're talking about, like, if a family really needs services, we're talking about counseling or even just basic medical care. Our tribal communities are heavily reliant on the Indian Health Service, which is a governmental system that doesn't always meet the needs of community. So we're thinking about like medical needs not being met. There was huge food insecurity during the pandemic. In our communities, in particular the Navajo Nation, which is one of the tribes that we serve in partnership with two other tribal coalitions, there's only 6 grocery stores on the entire reservation, which is the size of West Virginia. We're talking about food deserts and the ability for folks to access food. We're also talking about communities who might not have access to clean and running water. That, all of these are systemic barriers to health and living well. And so our families, are struggling against all of these different forms of oppression. But you said, of course, it doesn't excuse the behavior. We do need to address this.